Thank you, and we are so happy that you're joining us today on behalf of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. We can go to the next slide. Great. I just want to welcome you. My name is Anna Clough, and I serve as a co-director at the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And we are so glad that you have joined us for part 2 of this ethics series. And we like to open up all of our sessions in a good way. And so I just want to invite you as a participant to share your name and your role in the community if you're involved in a juvenile healing to wellness court, and maybe one word for the week that's maybe guiding your work, or a word that you hope guides your work this coming week. So I know we're coming to the end of this week, but this is something we like to do in our own team. So feel free to share in the chat if there's a word that comes to mind that's guiding your work this week or guiding your work with youth. Would love to know who we have in the room and something that you would like to share. Jacob, I'll share. I think I shared a word at the start of this week for me. I think it was reconnect. I'm going to put that in the chat. Feel free to share.
I can't remember what my word was in the beginning of the week, but considering we're here on Thursday already, I'm going to say persistence.
Okay. It's a good word. And I'll give a minute because I know we're right at the start of the hour. We might still have people joining. Invite you to type in the chat. Hope everyone is having a good week so far. Oh, nice. That's a good word. Rebellious. Refreshed. Oh, nice. Just back from Hawaii. Thanks for letting us know. I have a friend who's in Hawaii right now, so she's been posting pictures of what she's waking up to every morning. I'm a little bit jealous not being in Hawaii. So we have refreshed, rebellious. We have a lot of R words. Reconnect. Jacob threw us off with the P word. Persistence. So I will let people continue to type in the chat. Feel free to share where you're joining from. Would love to know if you're involved in a juvenile healing to wellness court or in a wellness court. Let us know your word for the week. And we are really happy that you're here. We can go to the next slide. So we have the wonderful opportunity to have the Honorable Judge Carrie Garrow joining us. She is the Chief Judge at the St. Regis Mohawk Tribe, and we are in part 2 of this ethics series. And so if you want to hear her full bio, you can watch part 1 of this of the series on our YouTube channel. We have that archived. We also save all of our materials are accessible through our Tribal Youth Resource Center website. We are funded by the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. We're a cooperative partner, and we're housed at the Tribal Law and Policy Institute. So I want to welcome back Judge Garrow and thank her for her time and her contributions to the work of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. And we are looking forward to a great session today talking about the issue of ethics in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court. So I think if you want to say hello, I know my colleague Jacob's on as well, so he might want to introduce himself after you say hello.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here again. And I'm sorry, one of my cats has decided to join us. I'm grateful to be here. I should clarify, I'm not rebellious when it comes to ethics. But I think those of us, I was trying to organize my office this week and came across one of my favorite books, which is called Rebellious Lawyering, and read it in law school and pretty much have followed it. And I think people who do healing to wellness courts, we're problem solvers and solve things outside the box. So we're a little rebellious. And it gets frustrating. I've been frustrated this week with people who don't want to be rebellious with me. So I'm so glad you're all here.
Thank you. We can go to the next slide. And I think Jacob, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jacob Metoxen. I'm a native from Wisconsin, living here in Wisconsin. That photograph of me is when I had shorter hair. When I was living in New Mexico, I recently moved here from New Mexico, where I was practicing law. Right now, I provide technical assistance. I see some of the grantees are here, so it's good to see you all. I'm excited about the conversation too. I know part one was really great with Judge Garrow. She's got a lot of really useful information. And I know ethics is kind of a big topic that we get a lot of questions about from our grantees. So hopefully you all can join in on the chat and participate. So thank you all for being here again today.
Thank you, Jacob. I think we can go to the next slide. And if you are an OJJDP tribal grantee, we would invite you to take part in our monthly dialogues, and we will be visiting with Judge Garrow again even after today's session. So we'll share an announcement about that session. If you're a grantee, look forward to seeing you in those conversations. But today we are talking ethics. So I will hand it off to you, Judge Garrow.
Thank you. I think you all will be tired of me. And I wish we were in person because it's a great size group. And if we were all in a room, we could sit around and really interact. But I hope you'll continue to interact in the chat, and Anna and Jacob will make sure I don't miss it as we go. But so today we're picking up on the conversation. But if you weren't here last time, don't worry about it. If you have questions, if we talk about something that maybe we're not explaining well today, just type it in the chat. But we really wanted to talk about we talked about last time, understanding the different ethical rules that are applicable in a tribal juvenile healing to wellness court. I'm so sorry. I don't know why all of a sudden he's gotten up from his nap. And so we went a little bit and talked in detail last time. And this time we'll recap it, but we also want to have some, and we're going to go through some real world case studies about decision making and what we should do. And so we really want you to participate. And then we'll cap off, which we could spend hours talking about, the strategies that support enhanced team engagement and service provision for your juveniles involved, or your youth involved in juvenile healing to wellness court. And it's a real skill. So, and I'll, be completely upfront. I do not run a juvenile healing to wellness court. We have an adult, and we have a family treatment court. So we see some youth through there. I actually this week was involved with a youth circle for some of our strategic planning, and I do a lot of other youth stuff outside the courtroom, and it is a skill to get youth to talk to you. And it doesn't happen overnight. So hopefully we'll get some time to talk about that. But let's go to our next slide. Okay, so we'll just quickly recap, and Anna and Jacob are going to jump in too. So the first time we talked about basically why we need ethical rules. We also talked about there are different rules for different team members. And of course, unfortunately, we can't all have the same rules, but we have different roles. That's why we work together as a team, because we're all different. So of course, we're going to have somewhat different rules. And we talked about how we work within these rules while we also work in this environment where we're team members. And even though sometimes we have a different playbook, we should have one big playbook together, how we work together. So we have open communication. And sometimes you're open about, maybe I have something I can't disclose, but it's important for that open communication and to collaborate together. And that's why we have to understand other people's ethical rules. In addition to understanding our own, let me tell you, when I was in law school, I took ethics, hated it. Never in a million years. And I don't even know how I got started, like doing workshops on ethics. I think because nobody else wanted to do it, basically. But now I really enjoy it. Well, I should say, I think maybe I enjoy the judicial ethical rules. The attorney rules are let's just say difficult, and go on to the next slide. Okay, so we'll just recap real quickly. So why ethics? It helps us figure out, right, what's good for individuals and for society. It establish our duties that we owe ourselves and others. And without ethics, it'd just kind of be a mishmash. I think hurting each other and doing whatever we wanted. And sometimes when we do what we want, we hurt other people. So we need some guidelines, especially in our professions. And if we don't have any standards, then it's really hard to be a profession, right? We don't have any sort of code of conduct that we will adhere to and hold other people accountable to make sure that we're helping our clients, whoever they are, whether we're counselors or whether we're attorneys. Anna and Jacob, did you want to jump in and add anything?
I think a couple of the things that you shared are really important. So I know for myself, coming into a couple of different programs where you had this collaborative team, and the sharing of information and trying to make sure that you are having effective case management, but also navigating those own roles that are, I want to say, law school professional responsibility is almost a year-long class. So you have 2 semesters, and the whole time you're talking about, here's the expectations of you as an attorney, here's all of the things that you're supposed to protect as part of this client relationship. Then you walk into this team-based environment where you're kind of tipping all of that into, but now my job is to be completely transparent and open and honest. And so I think coming into this team relationship, it is important to have that, one of the key components, that understanding the other person's role. Like, this is a key component to the functioning of the wellness court. So very important to understand the other team members and maybe their background and what are those things that they need to adhere to as part of their profession, but now as part of this team are willing to transition some of those things so that we can really build this restorative and therapeutic environment. So I think it's a big jump for some, maybe not others. But coming to this in a team-based way, I think is really, really the most important thing so that we can serve youth in the way that they need to be served.
One of the things I was thinking, listening to you, was that popped into my head was, we expect a lot of the youth when they're in juvenile healing to wellness court. And so we also expect a lot of our team members too. And sometimes we don't really acknowledge that they're changing, like you talked about. We're kind of turning things on their heads. And we always tell our participants, it's okay to struggle and make mistakes. I think sometimes maybe we're a little harder on ourselves or our team when we struggle with this group environment, and it's okay, but be open about that. Like, this is hard because of XYZ, or this policy isn't working for me. Can we talk about it? But give yourself some credit and some grace, and your team members too, that this, if this is new to them, or even if it's not new to them, it still can be hard to do something different. All right, let's go to the next slide. So we have different, and we won't go into super detail. Like Anna said, you can go back and if you didn't get a chance to be here last time, go back and watch it. But they're difficult and different ethical rules for team members. So attorneys, case managers, clinical staff, judges, educators, we all have different ethical rules and responsibilities. And so it's really important to understand, and you don't have to go into detail understanding the ethical rules for another team member, but having a basic understanding, at least how they're different. And I think my job as a judge is making sure other people understand and trying to get that perspective, and being respectful of other people's ethical rules. So Anna, Jacob, did you want to add anything before we move on to that?
Yeah, I think I was a practicing attorney, as I indicated, in New Mexico, representing the tribe. So having that understanding of other people's obligations, professional ethics and their obligations, I think gave me a better idea of why cases go the way they do. So I would just kind of harp on the fact that when there's a better understanding, even on like a behavioral health side of what the ethical obligations are, then I feel like the case can go in a more fluid motion, and that just kind of helps the team understand and create that atmosphere where they're more comfortable sharing information because they know what the limits are and what each other's obligations are. So for me, that was a big part of moving forward as a legal professional.
Absolutely. Thank you. Let's go to the next slide. So it's all about open communication and collaboration. And that way people know what you're expecting. And I think that's really one of the jobs as the judge. And other team members too, they don't get to not to sit on the sidelines. And if you are like we kind of laugh about it at work, that in reality I'm an introvert. I'm perfectly happy staying at home with a good book, but I play an extrovert really well. And so sometimes we have to step out of ourselves to communicate and collaborate and get along. But that may be hard for us, just that might go a little bit against our nature. And sometimes as judges or other team members, we need to facilitate that. And especially with our youth too, they come with very different personalities. And but the whole point of ethical rules, and especially with youth too, like whatever your role is, making sure that you have the correct consent and waivers, but making sure the youth understand what you can do and what you can't do. And remind them over and over, right? Because they, for whatever reason might not understand, and but make sure they understand it in their terms. You know, our youth are super smart, but they have not, been through your life experience, so they may not necessarily understand your explanation. So when you're talking about the rules of things that you might have to share or you will share and required, and help them understand, like, this is learning to live in recovery, is also learning to live and be open about even when we make mistakes and taking responsibility for them. And so we expect the youth to be open, but we'll be open too, right, when they share stuff, because we're not going to hide things anymore. We talk about them, and we deal with them. And that really helps when they understand the purpose of healing to wellness, and also the rules. Anna, Jacob, anything you wanted to share?
So we recently had a session with the newly funded OJJDP tribal grantees, and one of the things that we were talking about was having your plan in place, because you have these multiple levels of communication between the youth participant themselves, and that's what makes juvenile wellness court unique, is that you also have this added layer of also working with the parent or the caregiver that's involved. Then you have your normal programmatic expectations of being able to communicate with not only each other, but also if you have tribal leadership or governance that's involved in program management or coordination. So it can be a lot to think about when you're thinking about all these different levels of communication and relationships and the different dynamics for all of those things. So just being able to work with the team early on and have conversations about what are the expectations for each other, and really clarifying, and we're going to talk about this later in the session, but just having really clear policies and procedures to help you and guide you, so that you're not having to always go back and ask a lot of questions to make a decision or to move something forward. Because I think the goal is, you don't want the youth to be in there forever. Like, you want to support them and help them move on, and keep cases moving forward. I know I don't want to call the youth the cases, but the whole process, keep it moving forward. And I know that happens a lot just in regular juvenile court. Things get stalled, there's delays just because of the natural process of things getting delayed. And so the whole point of this is that continued intensive contact, moving things forward and really helping people progress, and not having something sit there for years.
That's a good point.
And just to add to what Anna is saying, I think there's the other side as well, like having an understanding of what each other's ethical obligations are in terms of the team dynamic, but also knowing when someone either skirts or passes their ethical obligations and what to do after that fact. Instead of having that situation be something that holds the team back, addressing it in a manner that's kind of makes the team stronger, for the benefit of the participant. So that part of understanding ethical obligations is there as well.
Right. And to build on that is also, we had a situation, and these were adults, but an adult accidentally, without really thinking about it, even though I say, now I say it more frequently, what happens in Healing to Wellness Court is stays here, it's confidential. And he, without thinking, was friends with another participant's son. And when the son said, "Hey, how's my mom doing?" He's like, "Oh, she's doing great," thinking he was doing a good thing. And yet it was not, she, and we, we had a talking circle about it. And it ended up working out, but making sure the participants know that the rules as well, and reminding them. And so I try to do that more frequently now, that even when we think we're being innocent and, that we can step over the rules, and then what are the consequences? Yeah. Awesome. Let's go to the next slide. So open communication, collaboration. And just a quick note, and do remember, as advocates, right, as attorneys, you're still an advocate. And sometimes, depending on, your role of case managers and things of that nature, you have different rules as well, but you also, may end up advocating for the youth, and that's great, and that's fine. It's the judge's job to be impartial and independent, which sometimes is hard. And so just to remember that, and talk about it. We've already talked a little bit about all of these, is just a lot of you outside of the judge have direct contact with the participants. And so they need to know what the rules are, what you are going to share, what you cannot share, and make sure that, and we'll talk about this throughout the case studies, make sure you have those consent forms are so important. And that's usually when we first start talking about a participant, or a potential participant. Typically when our coordinator does the intake for them, she does the consent forms right there. But usually our treatment and mental health people will ask right away, do you have the consent form? Okay, if you do, please send it over. And so, because a lot of times they already either know the people, or they're already in outpatient or in mental health. So those consent forms are critical. And one thing that we need to work on is that make sure that everybody on your team, and I'm sure we could do a whole session on this, the consent forms meet the requirements for everybody on your team. Because I think because I know we need to redo ours, because our mental health person, shared with me once, well, something needed to be changed. So we need to work on ours, because they have different requirements than just we found the standard legal one online and decided to use that one, So make sure that they cover everything. And there's some great examples out there. And I'm sure Anna and Jacob probably have some if you need them.
We do. And I will share those, and I always share them with that caveat that you need to make sure this complies there locally and then with the individual providers, because it's a starting point. It's a good starting point to have a template, and to read back completely through any statutes that you're trying to cover. So make sure if you have local counsel there, we will gladly share the examples that we have, but we always advise, please let your local legal counsel review that if you're going to actually use that in the court. So we can share any of those materials that we have.
Yeah. and it looks like there's a question in the chat, which I think is a really good question, is how often should consent forms be reviewed? Frequently. That would be I mean, I've seen the gambit. Okay, so I think there's a continuum, right? So you don't want to be in the continuum that maybe does them just once and never revisits. And then I've seen other places that, have them re-sign them all the time or just review them. I would encourage you, especially with youth, and especially early on with adults, they're just getting to a good place in their minds to review it quite frequently, just as a reminder, you know. But there's no that I'm aware of. There's no requirement as to you should do it every few months. But I think it's a good practice to do it um, frequently in the beginning. Anna, Jacob, did you want to address that at all?
I think the ones that we have, they have a stipulation for like this shall remain effective, if you're only revisiting it once, probably not great, because especially for youth, it's possible you might have additional service providers or others that come in as they start to build up, and maybe you're working other things into that case management plan. So it might be important to review internally, like intermittently, for you to see, is there a new provider or somebody else who's gotten involved with the team or with this particular youth, and we need to make sure they're added. And how are you doing that? How are you updating those forms? And then making sure that you're working with both the youth and the parent or the caregiver, whoever's able to legally sign that waiver, making sure those are completed. So I think for youth, maybe every 3 or 6 months would be reasonable. But like Judge Garrow is saying, it's almost like, well, you don't want to make them feel bogged down every time you're meeting, like, oh, let's sign these forms again. So find like a happy medium for making sure you're covered, but also reminding them, like they have waived this privilege. So it's important for them to be protected.
And I think it could also be driven a little bit by your youth and, their age and just sort of, where they are in life, whether or not they're going to remember that. And so, even if you don't have them re-sign it, a gentle reminder every once in a while is just, as you're chatting with them, just remember, these are the things that I have to share. And explaining why, not that you're just, well, I'm gonna tell on you, but explain, why. Remember the purpose of why you're here, and also remind the youth that when we share these things, we share it in a good way. It's never in a way to get them into trouble, but it's done in a good way, to help them, and that we're concerned and tailor that for each youth. Oh, next slide. So here's just a couple different ideas of some of the different kinds of ethical rules, right? We have the judges, have the judicial canons, and those will vary according to your tribe. So a lot of them are based on the model canons, but some of them have tailored, enacted their own, and they're very specific, dictated by your tribal laws and your customs and traditions, and that's phenomenal. So then, of course, you have the ethics rules for attorneys. Then you have FERPA for educational people. You also have clinical professional ethics standards. You can have community standards as well. Keep in mind, you may have people on your team who either they're elders or some people who might not have a license or held to an ethical standard. And so, what are your local standards, and do they understand the standards perhaps that you have in your policies and procedures about, sharing and confidentiality. So did you want to share anything, Anna and Jacob?
I have a question, Judge Garrow. In terms of your experience as a judge, when you have your staff, do you have your staff sign confidentiality agreements initially just as overall staff members at the beginning of their employment? And if there isn't that agreement, would you, if there is that agreement, would you consider that agreement covering the Juvenile Healing and Wellness Court ethical obligations?
That's a good question. What we do, so we don't have a specific thing they sign. We have ethical rules for court staff, and then for the court clerks who would be in the courtroom, they have a handbook, and it's also, I'm pretty sure it's in the handbook as well. So they know, so like you talked about, like what happens when they step over the line. So our staff knows, and our two staff members, they would be governed more by the that work on the Healing to Wellness team, by their job description and by our policies and procedures. So our staff know if they were to overstep, there could be consequences as an employee. So yeah, we haven't, and that's a good question, because when we have visitors, we make them sign a confidentiality form, but we've never done that with our staff because the other policies we have in place. Good question. And something to think about. All right, let's go to the next slide. All right, so we're going to do some case studies. So they're only examples, just that we came up with, or one I actually came across in an article, and then I morphed it into something that was useful to us. So, don't go home and say, Anna talked about so-and-so. And I'm just kidding. Yeah, these are completely 100% hypothetical. But I hope that you'll participate in the chat, because we want to have a good discussion. And that's the whole point of these, is I hope they're not too easy. One of them might, maybe. And I think sometimes we at least for judges, we see the judges getting in trouble in the news, and those are like, well, how come that judge didn't know that was wrong? Because that's pretty obvious to me. But there's a lot of gray stuff sometimes, that sometimes we don't even think about, like just for instance, this wasn't actually not an ethical, well, kind of an ethical thing. I was having a conversation with my aunt about a business practice that was going on in the community. She brought it up, and I was driving her somewhere, and I didn't really think too much about it. And then a month later, somebody comes in and files a case, and I was like, is that about such and such a business? And I told because my law clerk always tells me, like, when so and so filed a case, and it's about this, and I said, well, is it involved this specific business? Then I can't sit on it, because I already had a conversation about it with my aunt, and maybe know some things that I shouldn't. And so there are just, sometimes we step into the gray area when we don't even mean to, and there's not much, all we do is we follow the ethical rules to get out of the gray area. And so we hope this helps to get you to think, and think about, the things that are going on in your professions. And I call it sort of like my gut check. It's not really my gut check, it's more in my chest. Like, if I doing something and I start to get this feeling right here, I'm like, oof. Like when my law clerk told me, it's like, there's this business that this woman just filed against this business. I was just like, oh no, I hope this might be what my aunt was talking about. And so let's go to, I think, our first case study. Okay, so here we have a participant. So it would be a youth, discloses to his attorney that he used over the weekend. So it's a participant in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness court. The participant is about to move up to another phase and promises not to do it again to his attorney. Okay. And the attorney is a Juvenile Healing to Wellness team member. What should he, being the attorney, do? And we're going to wait for you to put things in the chat. We're going to be comfortable with silence.
I know. We should pull the Jeopardy music up.
I know. I was thinking the same thing.
Maybe Jacob can hum it for us while we wait.
Or some sort of peaceful elevator music.
I know, some jazz. There's a whole world I don't know about in music while we wait. I was looking at my daughter wants to try guitar, and so last night, she's a lefty.
Oh.
So I was I had this whole sleuthing going on about left-handed versus right-hand guitars, and then stringing them the opposite direction. So yeah, fun. But then that made me go down the rabbit hole of a left-handed jazz guitarist at about 11 o'clock last night.
Who knew? All right. Excellent. Amber has put in the chat that should be staffed with the rest of the team. Okay. All right. Anyone else?
We'll wait for more. We want to have
Oh.
good conversation today.
Yep. Katie is saying it is confidential. Oh, and so I don't know if it's Jen or Jenny. Remind the youth about the consent they gave to share information with the wellness court team, and that this is something that needs to be discussed for their progress. Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah. Let's see. We'll give a couple more minutes to see if anyone else wants, or seconds, anyways. If anyone else wants to jump in. Trying very hard to make sure my cat doesn't hit my volume button again. Doesn't it depend too on whether, so this is from Joanne, doesn't it depend too on whether the person is an attorney they're telling versus a caseworker? Oh.
Yes. I think this is and when we were preparing, I think this is the same discussion that Jacob and I had. So it goes back to this relationship, right. So the attorney's relationship on the team, and right. That agreement, like what's being shared, what isn't being shared, having those policies set ahead of time. And that's why you have those waivers to promote that transparency.
Yep. And Paul says the move to next phase may be delayed after conversing with the client. So, and I'm going to just fill in for Paul here. That I think this is what I think Paul is getting to, that even as the attorney, even if you're not specific, you could also just voice to the team, I don't think my client's ready to move on. So, and I loved everybody's comments. So essentially the struggle is, right, so if it's an attorney, it's attorney-client privilege. And is there a waiver? Do you have the policies and procedures? And is there a waiver in place? And make sure the client understands that, the youth. And I loved remind them, right, that this is something that needs to be discussed for their own progress. So there is that path, right? You're an attorney, you've got the waiver in place, and remind the youth this is something. If you don't have the waiver in place, then it's confidential. But you can also take the path of Paul and just without disclosing why, and you can be upfront, right, at the staffing. I can't tell you why, because I don't have a waiver for whatever reason. But perhaps the youth is not ready to move on. Okay, so Jen or Jenny, I would say keep it confidential if the attorney wasn't part of the team, but because it explicitly says the attorney is part of the team, that confidentiality is waived. Nice. At least with our confidentiality agreement, that's what we have for a wellness court. Absolutely, right? So hopefully as part of the team, right, that they know, and the waivers in there, and just reminding the youth, and also commending the youth for the honesty, because I guarantee you the youth knows he's supposed to move up, but obviously trusted, had a good relationship with the attorney, and ask the judge to commend the youth and the team for being honest, because that's half the battle. So there's some really good ways to do that with the youth, so they don't feel like, oh, everybody's just snitching on me. And so there's some excellent ways to handle that. And so I think the important thing is to definitely make sure that it's in the policies and procedures. Right. Anna, Jacob?
I was just going to add, that came up right at the tail end, brought to mind some of the conversations we've had about for the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court is the progress forward. And like you're saying, commending the honesty, because, we don't know what phase this particular youth was in, but there's not that expectation that every test is clean during that first, 2 phases even, or however long the timing is for the phase. So just the honesty there is definitely acknowledging that, and then also supporting that movement forward. So like, we're not going to we're seeing this as you being honest. We're going to move forward from here, because we've talked about not pushing people backwards and making them feel like, okay, I failed in a certain way. It's like, no, you've acknowledged it, and we're going to be responsible and accountable for it and move forward as a team. So I think I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Joanne's saying it's complicated. Yes. That's why I hated ethics as a law student. But you could open the door, right, to disclosing too much. And so ideally, maybe they would be sharing that with a case manager where you're not raising those issues, and it's much more clear cut that they have to share. And absolutely. I love that she could point out to you that they themselves offer that to the court. I love that. Right. This is a point of or part of being accountable, that, if you're the attorney, or even if you're the case manager, that is great. Thank you for sharing. Let's share this with the judge. Will you do that? Can you be brave and do that? And then just prep your judge to make sure that they appropriately respond. And again, commend the youth, that the youth had the courage to share. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I think these people could just solve all the problems that we have. So maybe we should move on to the next case study. And I forget, how late are we going till?
I think we have till about 2:15 for content, room for Q&A. So I think we're good.
Okay. Let's go to the next one. Okay, hold on. I have to move my chat so I can see it. Okay. So this is number 2. The judge presides over a juvenile healing to wellness court and the juvenile dependency cases. So, and of course, every court calls them differently, but consider that the child neglect case. Okay, so your youth is in juvenile healing to wellness, but a parent has a child neglect case. At the juvenile healing to wellness court, the judge receives information about the juvenile's mom being intoxicated over the weekend. She has a permanency hearing the next week. She, being the judge, that's me, has a permanency hearing the next week with the juvenile's mother. Can the judge hear the mother's case? All right, let's see what pops up in the chat. Perfect.
Well, there's a little jazzy horn in this version.
That's awesome. I always wanted to. The few times I taught, I think at the Travel on Policies Enhancement training, taught the session on confidentiality. I always wanted to turn it into a game because it can be so boring. Okay, so Joanne says yes. I'm thinking of why, but I think yes. And I'm sorry, it's either Jen or Jenny. Honestly, I have no clue. I would think it depends on if it's considered family court. Okay. Well, maybe we have stumped them. So Jenny. Am I Jenny? Okay. Thank you.
Janae? Maybe Janae? Is it Janae?
It's always hard learning people's names over chat. Jenny. Anyone else? Oh, like how Forrest Gump says Jenny. Smiley face. That's such a good movie. All right. Well, hopefully keep typing. If you're typing, keep going in the chat. I'll give you 3 things to think about, and then Anna and Jacob will jump in, and hopefully more of you will jump in the chat. First of all, this is when you do your little gut check as the judge. Can you be fair? So Paul says no. Okay. let's see. And Amber says, how would this be? Oh, good, this is awesome. They're all jumping in. How would this be a confidentiality issue? I hope the judge would be non-biased. Let's hope. Okay. In Superior Court, the same judge hears delinquency and dependency. In Tribal Court, I imagine it's rooted in the concept of our goal of holistic wellness for the entire family. Awesome. Awesome answers. It's not it's not a clear cut, and a lot of it will depend on how many judges you have. Right? And a lot of it will depend on the judge yourself, because the first question is you have to do the check of when you're the judge, and hopefully you have sometimes someone to talk with, because that sometimes, so my law clerk is also tasked with dealing with all the ethical issues, so I can go talk to her and we just talk it out a lot of times, if you feel like you can be fair, right? And that can be hard, and this leads to the other two issues. Is you've received ex parte information about another pending case, because the mom wasn't there, the mom's attorney wasn't there. Mom's attorney's probably not gonna be very happy. And the dad's not even in this scenario, but that could be an issue too. And then the question is the third thing is the appearance, right? The appearance of whether or not you can be impartial. Because even if you've done your gut check, and you feel okay about it, and you're willing to hear mom's story, what's the appearance? Because you've probably heard a lot about the mom in Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, because you're going to hear about the youth's home situation. So there are a couple things you can do to help cure that, those problems ahead of time. Is, so if you have cases with the youth and the mom, is to make sure, again, there's consent and waivers, right? That you're hearing ex parte information, and you can also give the mom, and maybe you already do this, maybe you do this in your Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court, that the parents are invited to be there, but I think this should particularly be so when the parent has a case pending in front of you, so they have an opportunity to be there and understand and know. And if they're not there, you have to disclose, which also puts you in a bit of a tricky situation, because Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court is confidential. So you have to have your waivers in place, and this might be a little different for this youth if their mom has a pending case that we may have to disclose to your mom or your dad or both and their attorneys, things that you say, and explain to them why you have to do this. And again, and I think this would be a tough one just from the youth perspective, depending on the youth, that they may feel scared to say anything about their mom and dad, and get them in trouble, or not.
I have a quick question. So if the permanency matter occurred before the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court matter, would you advise perhaps the judge consider not taking the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court matter to prevent any sort of potential information trickling in?
So that's, the other option is, you can, sit on one or the other if you have the judges. I mean, there are a lot of individuals who advocate, that the judges hear everything involving the family. It just, you have to have, all the right waivers in place. So it's really up to you and your jurisdiction. So you can absolutely do that, have a completely separate judge, either doing the Juvenile Healing to Wellness and then any dependency matters. So what I do because it's happened 2 or 3 times now, when I have someone that I've had in my adult or family healing to wellness, and they come in just on, because we just do civil cases, other than our healing to wellness. So if they come in and they're involved in a civil case, I usually have the other judge sit on the not the healing to wellness, the other, on the civil case, just because I'm like, boy, now I know a lot about that one party. And, especially if they're arguing we're doing probate or, something like that, I just, I don't want to know all the things I know. or have to be forced to disclose them, or so it's really up to you. A lot of places do like uh you know to have the cases together. It just depends, and a lot of places don't have the judges. So Jacob and Anna, do you want to jump in on this one at all?
I know we're talking a little bit about strategies after, but I think this is a good one that demonstrates, we're going to decide beforehand that we do have a special judge or somebody else that comes in when we have these overlapping cases.
Yep.
Decided prior, so that you're not dealing on the back end with, well, now what? How are we going to handle this? Because this is what happened. So it's good to think through possible scenarios. And, in some communities, you don't have multiple judges. There's just not that capability. So, like you've shared, as best possible, without bias, how can you move forward? And I think you had walked through, disclosure to all the parties involved, like this is what's been shared, this is what's known, and moving forward from there so that the parties can make whatever motions or whatever else they want to do on their end from there. Because you are talking about dependency, so that means the court is, they don't have their rights as a parent right now fully in place. The courts obviously has that youth under their care, and so these are really serious issues. So you want to make sure that everyone understands what their rights are moving forward.
Yeah. And even if you have another judge, there's a very good likelihood that someone on the team is involved in the dependency case, right? Could be the child welfare, the youth, whatever your case where, it's hard. Every place is different. And so you should have, especially in juvenile healing to wellness court, something in place. Like, what do you do when your youth parent has a dependency case, is in family court because of the parent's conduct? Or maybe in criminal court, then what are you going to do? And how you can disclose. So, all right, should we go into the next one? All right, well, let's do case study 3. Okay. So here we have another participant about to graduate. He tests positive. The coordinator believes it was just a tiny slip up and is worried about how the youth will handle not graduating as planned, right? Probably a lot of pressure on the youth, right? She, being the coordinator, has a close relationship with the youth and will continue to engage in his life after graduation to provide support. She's considering not informing the team. And I read into this like the coordinator thinks that she can just get him through this and address any sort of issues after graduation. So, what should she do? Let's see her answers in the chat. I think my cats got afraid I would call on them. They all left. Okay. So here we have Janae. Janae, I'm so sorry. She definitely needs to inform the team, and the graduation should be paused, especially since the youth didn't come to her with the information. Okay. All right. All right. Definitely needs to inform the team and the graduation. Yep. Okay. Anyone else? I think this, like, when we sit around and talk about it, I think this seems very sort of easy and clear cut. But when you think about it from a coordinator, the coordinator, Joanne says the coordinator should inform the team. The coordinator has, depending on the length of your juvenile healing to wellness court, inform the team to justify your actions. Agree. Yep. The coordinator probably has developed a good relationship with this youth and wants to see them be successful. So, and Jamie jumped in. I agree. The team needs to be informed so they can address the slip up. If the slip up is not addressed, it can create the snowball effect later. So true. So true. And I hear quite frequently, I'm trying to think if we've had this happen with some of our participants, but I've heard quite frequently from other teams with adults. Sometimes, they get close to graduation and they essentially sabotage themselves because they don't feel that they're ready to leave. And so it's so important that the team know and address it. um and be sensitive to your coordinators that this might be difficult to them. And just like you praise your youth for being honest, praise your coordinators for being honest and sharing the bad news. um you know uh because it can be hard and disappointing. And you know our team has shed tears together when a participant has not been doing well, and that's okay. And so even though it seems easy on paper, I think it takes a strong coordinator to always be upfront no matter the consequences. Anna, Jacob.
I think I shared my initial thoughts on this one were that I would like to share it with the team, because that way you're not responsible for making that decision by yourself. You're not bearing the weight of the decision. That's the whole reason you collaborate, is to have somebody to bounce ideas or situations off of, and that should be, I think, that's the whole point of all of this. Like, the point is you have more people helping you make these decisions and what's best in this situation.
Yeah, for me, it seems like if the coordinator doesn't have that trust amongst the team, then it may even be time to find a new coordinator. If they're not willing to play by the rules like everyone else is. And I mean, there's no telling the individual won't graduate. If the team has a discussion, there could be, an agreement. Well, she or he has to do so and so amount of volunteer hours, for the slip up, because it's an ongoing battle. So yeah, that'd be a huge red flag if the coordinator didn't inform the team of something pretty crucial.
Yeah. So in the chat, Janae said, I feel that by not following the guidelines of the program, the youth sees the coordinator making her own rules so important. And the youth thinks they are the exception and continue to make slip ups. So true, right? You can still make it a positive situation instead of a reprimand. With addiction, slip ups are expected. Just means the youth needs more support and is not ready to graduate just yet. Absolutely. Then I think it's Giselle said she should consult with others to get a different perspective on the concern, especially considering the close relationship. Absolutely. Then Anna typed, the beauty of wellness court is you have a team supporting decision making. So true, right? You're not on your own. Other coordinators may be on the fence with same concerns. Colleen said, I guess it depends on who is part of the team. If the therapist or counselor is part of the team, it may be helpful to understand what life event may have led to use. So important. I would want to know the thoughts of the whole team who have an interest in care for this youth. It matters the youth gets the best level of care, and that means from the whole team. Absolutely. Right. That's such a good point. The coordinator should not feel like they have to take on everybody's role. That's why you have a team. And I'm going to go back to one of the comments, I think in the first scenario, was the coordinator can tell the youth, thank you for sharing. I know that was hard given where you are. And now will you share it with the team? So the coordinator doesn't have to do it. Right. And explain to you, you've been with us long enough that you know the importance of being truthful. And it's okay. Slip ups happen. That's a nature of addiction, and just be honest, and have the youth do it, which actually I think will says if the youth will do that, it says a lot about it. And then and like Colleen said, and we always do this when we have people slip up and use part of it is just identifying why, right? Why. All right. Awesome. That was an awesome discussion. All right. I think we have one more, don't we?
I think we have two more, but we can see how much time we have. So
okay. Okay, let's go to the next one. Oh, this is an interesting one though. Okay, a new Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court probation officer is tasked with transportation duties for the youth and their families to court. Lately, some of the families have asked if they can be transported to other family members' residences. Some are located long distances from the family residence. On one occasion, she helped the family, that's a probation officer, to run several errands. She's concerned she might be going against team policies, but she also wants to make sure the families get to where they would like or need to go. What should she do? This is such a good question. Because don't we all want to go the extra mile? I mean, that's kind of the people who end up in these jobs always go the extra mile anyways, right? We want to help.
Yeah, I'm interested to.
I know.
I know a couple of people in here in this room. I think you have some good thoughts.
All right.
I'll save my thoughts, but my thoughts come from personal experience. I'll just share that. We lost our Jeopardy music. I wish I could find the jazz I was listening to last night.
She could ask the judge to buy a van. No, I'm just kidding. Is that allowed in the grant application? Are you allowed to buy a van? Is that an allowable expense?
Yeah, we'll have some answers trickle in here.
Oh, here we go. Here's Janae. She should speak with the participant's case manager. They should be helping the family with resources to meet their needs. There's a certain liability that comes with going outside of job duties. Yes, good answer. Absolutely. What happens if you get in an accident or something happens inside the van? Okay, Colleen, there's absolutely no reason to be doing anything in this scenario without knowing for sure. Check policy. Ooh, now they're coming in here. Check policies and procedures, or ask supervisor. Boundaries are important here, or participants may keep pushing. So important, right? Right, because that's where, especially with our adults, you know, they're very good. They're very skilled at working the system. So yeah. Staff with the supervisor, says Amber. Joanne, if her duties are to court, then she shouldn't be taking them other places without prior permission. Paul, could open a can of worms that you may not want to get your team into. I would encourage other means of resources. All excellent answers, identifying like all the problems that could arise. So here you have a good-hearted person who's new. Yeah, so Anna, did you want to jump in?
I love every single response because I think it speaks to all the different aspects of the scenario. And so one of the things in my thinking and coming up with this question is that at a base, at the foundation of the court, I think it is you're really wanting to meet needs. And I think as a team, you can decide, you know, what are the needs that we're able to meet and we're capable to meet under this project or whatever it is we're doing here as far as the court. And so I think you can decide like, yeah, we're okay doing transportation. We're okay in doing these limited services, but reflecting that in your policies and procedures. And one of the reasons I think if you're a tribal grantee, it's really important to have policies and procedures in place. It's important to know if you have any federal guidelines tied to your grant and the way that you're spending funds or doing reimbursement. So definitely, if you have a grant tied to the work, that you understand any financial implications. But I also like the boundaries response. So, you know, I think you shared, Judge Garrow, if you're providing a service to one, are you providing it to all? And does your team have the capacity to do that? So there's so many things that come up with this. It's really important if you are doing transportation or other things, having some policies that support that particular activity or the service that's being provided.
Yeah. When I would also think as a probation officer, you would want it, one, you don't want it to suck up the time you're supposed to be doing your probation duties. But two, you could find yourself either overhearing or dropping people off at places where you shouldn't know that information. I mean, maybe as a probation officer, you would want to, but I think you're also blurring the lines of what your relationship is. You know, as a probation, you know, you're not the chauffeur. To get you a person to court, yes. And my thing always is with adults, you know, because I totally get the transportation issue, but I also fall back on, at least with adults, not with youth, that if the adults are dealing with substance use is like, well, you always seem to be able to get a ride to go somewhere to get alcohol or drugs, but yet you can't get a ride to come to court. Odd. You have skills, so now you need to use them in both places. And so Giselle said, I think it would depend on the services requested. Sometimes family need this assistance to continue their process from healing to wellness. So true. As long as it doesn't hinder with other duties. I think it also depends on the services provided within the community. Sometimes services are not provided. Collaboration is the key. Absolutely. This would be a perfect issue, right, to staff to bring to your staffing and to put in your policies and procedures. And is this really what you want your probation officer to be doing? Is it a limited time? Because remember, if you do it for one family, you got to be doing it for every family. And I don't know how many people are in your juvenile healing to wellness court, but your whole day, and depending on how big your reservation is, or the services off your territory, you could lose your whole day running people around. So, but I love this question.
Yeah, before we go to the next one, I think staffing. I think if Chris were on, she would share too that team dynamic and staffing and deciding beforehand what you all are going to be doing and not doing. It's helpful so you can back each other up. So family members like, oh, well, they wouldn't take me to so-and-so place. And, as a team member, a fellow team member, if you've already decided, well, we decided we just couldn't do that because, we have a lot of youth involved in the program right now. We're just not able to do that for everybody. So here's what we can do. And here's, kind of the limits there. And that way you have your team backing you up on the decisions that you're making.
And again, I think it depends on your role, right? Probation, that's not really a role. If you're a case manager, your role's a little different. If you were in dependency court, and maybe a little different, getting a youth to services. But, if you're just taking them to see family, then, that's not really your job. It's nice, but not really a job. All right, should we go? Do we have time for the last one?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Tribe B just voted a new tribal vice chairperson. The nephew of the vice chairperson is currently a participant in your juvenile healing to wellness court. The team received a notice. The nephew was found at a party over the weekend drinking. The judge had previously let the participant know that a sanction would need to be administered for any continued violation of the youth participation agreement. So clearly the youth has been struggling with some of the rules. The vice chairman contacts the case coordinator the Monday after the party, asking if she can do anything to help the nephew prior to the next juvenile healing to wellness court docket. So just know there's no sort of, I want my nephew to skate. She's just asking, she or he is just asking if there's anything to help the nephew. What should the coordinator do? Oh, Janae had dropped a note here in the chat about our previous one, just about being self-sufficient, right? If the PO is playing taxi, they are enabling, right? There's all these things to think about. Case management is not what they are trained to do, in my experience. So true. Probation training is very different from other things, and there are a lot of rules about not getting too attached and enabling. So sorry to interrupt the Jeopardy music.
No problem. I thought that was a really good case study as well, number 4, just because I've seen situations where from a liability standpoint, I think that's huge, and educating staff on liability. I've seen probation vehicles get stolen, get in high-speed chases, crash. A lot of things can happen when you deviate from point A to point B.
Yeah.
I was about to say, we get in a room with lawyers, and that last scenario reminded me of what is it, like a jaunt or a frolic? What are those rules about what you're doing on the job? And it can be a frolic, and if it's a frolic, the liability is different. And yeah, that goes into all kinds of insurance, all the things that we don't want to have to deal with. So let's just avoid it in the first place.
So if somebody in your van hijacks the van while you're you get out for a second. Yeah, that would be awful.
And we did get a response. I think Janae also responded on the coordinator and here. So she's
good. Yep, the coordinator should tell the vice chairperson they cannot discuss the juvenile's case with them as it's confidential. Yep, coordinator cannot discuss the case since it involves a juvenile. Well, in any healing to wellness. Okay, then Joanne just popped in. I would advise the case coordinator to respond in writing, tell him or her that they're unable to discuss the case with them, appreciate the concern, but cannot discuss the case. And so this comes from my confidentiality trainings that I've done. The answer, and I always tell my staff this, the answer is when the vice chair, we don't have a vice chair, but when the chief calls or one of the chiefs calls and says, hey, how's my nephew doing? Or can I help my nephew? The answer is I cannot confirm or deny that person is in healing to wellness. And that goes for youth as well, but even more so because at least for us, all matters involving youth are confidential. And so you can't even acknowledge that the person, unless there's a waiver or they're included. The vice chair, who's an aunt or an uncle, is included on the list of people that we can talk to. So, I mean, we've had adults who live with their moms, and we get moms get them to consent that if that we can talk to them, especially if we're looking for them, or that's actually been super helpful. I think we might have even had a girlfriend on the list of people that we could speak to. But it's also come up with, we had a participant we were worried about, and we wanted to do a welfare check on her, but we were concerned about contacting anyone other. She lived off their territory, and we kind of went around and around. We're like, well, if we, being the court, calls the sheriff, like we'd have to disclose that the person's in healing to wellness. And so we didn't feel comfortable doing that, because I don't think we could just anonymously call and say, could you go do a welfare check on this person and hang up? They'd want to know why. And so we kind of went around and around, and then just decided to leave it with, because this person was in our family treatment court, just to leave it with the child welfare agency, because they could go do a knock. Or if they wanted to call, that was up to them, whether they felt they could do that. So, yeah, I can't confirm or deny after you've looked at the list to see who's on the list. And that might be something, especially with your youth, and to talk to the parents, is there anyone other than the parent, or they have a guardian, whoever they're staying with? Is there any other adult, that it's okay to share information with, and then get the consent from the youth? Because there could be a grandma or an aunt, sort of the backup person. But Anna, Jacob, anything?
I think one of the things that TRC always, I think we try to convey in everything that we do, is just the autonomy that tribes should have to make and decide, this is the way our program is going to run. And I know for a couple of programs that we're working with, they do want to have like an elders panel involved. And so that extends that communication out even further of who might be involved, who might be a part of the decision making. And so it's not saying we're not saying you can't have that happen because there's going to be communication. It's make sure there's protections in place for everyone that's involved. Make sure that your policies reflect what you're really wanting to accomplish and who you're wanting to include. And then having a real awareness that we are in two worlds. And so you have this relational aspect of communication that might be occurring because this is how your community serves youth and how you engage with youth. And we have an elders panel, and we want that to be the way that we're having this accountability piece, but also acknowledging that if you're using an attorney who maybe they're barred by the state, or there is a tribal bar association, that the rules are very real and they're there for a reason. And we have to acknowledge that. So that person, their responsibilities, it should reflect in the policies. And there should be all these consents and waivers that we're talking about, so that everyone feels like they're protected and can be a part of this process very transparently and in a way that's effective for everybody that's involved. So just that dynamic of being in two different worlds and being able to be a part of the team in a good way.
Yeah. And just another thought that popped into my head, and this goes back to the confidentiality rules. Let's say the vice chair, so let's say she's the aunt. The aunt is on the list, right? Consent has been given and you can share information and the coordinator talks to you. It's the coordinator needs to remind the aunt that the information doesn't go further, right? Because she cannot share it any further with someone who's not on the list, right? She can't go to her sister or her grandma uh, and say, okay, we've decided we're going to do this to help nephew. She has to, that information is sacred, and she has to hold it and not share it.
And Judge, could the vice chair in this situation still, because for me, I see this as a golden opportunity, because a lot of times it's kind of, difficult to get marketing out about juvenile healing and wellness court, especially when communities are just getting started. So if you're able to have a leader who's involved, even if it's unfortunately, regarding their family member, and seeing the operation of the court, could that individual share that the aspects of the healing and wellness court without necessarily getting into details of how they gathered it?
They can, but I would be cautious because, there's the res grapevine. Okay. And, and it's hard sometimes. I even do this, like if I'm talking to tribal council and we're talking about healing to wellness, like I work so hard if I'm going to talk about healing to wellness to not, obviously I would never mention a name, but I don't even use he or she or do any sort of talk about, well, this incident happened, because it's in a small community, it's so easy to figure out, based on the nature of maybe the crime that they were publicly charged with. So I think I would, so the answer is yes. Could you do that? You'd have to be so careful. And for the vice chair to just be so careful that she doesn't share any information that would disclose the identity. So I think maybe, I would maybe not seize on that opportunity right away. Maybe after the youth graduates and, several years have passed, or maybe find another ally on tribal council. Because
that makes sense.
And to be honest, so if you want to use that avenue to share good information, that avenue can also be used to criticize you, right? If something goes wrong with that youth and they don't graduate and something awful happens, it's going to come back at you, right? Because people will be, it's happened to us, something bad happens with one of our participants and it's like, why weren't you doing your job? Well, we were, but it's not easy. So just be prepared for that. The avenue goes both ways. goes with good news and bad news. So I think, do you want to do questions? So we may not get to the next information.
Yep, we can go if there's any questions that you all have. We can go to the next slide. I think we were just wrapping up. Yeah. I think a lot of the strategies that we were talking about, we kind of integrated as we were responding to the questions, but yeah, we'll just wait for questions. Maybe you can say, a lot of this can be resolved in the planning process. If you're new and you're in that planning phase, working through difficult questions and scenarios. And we serve as a TA provider, so we're here and available to walk through potential things that might come up as you're developing the wellness court. And then I think we've reiterated multiple times now, very important to have your policies and procedures in place and to intermittently pause and look at those and review. I think we talked recently in one of our planning sessions that they're not going to update themselves. So if you change the way that you're doing something in reality, go back and make sure your policies are actually reflecting the decision or change that you've made in the way that you're providing services. I think we have plenty of material and communication plans. So if you all are needing that, let us know. I think we talked earlier, we have several samples of team confidentiality agreements, the waivers, the consents, and the different things that you might need in place so that you can share information. And Jacob, you briefly brought this up, but how do we handle it when we think there has been an ethical violation? So I think that might be the last point we really didn't get to go deeply into, but I think all of us agree it should be something restorative. So maybe there's something initially the team can do to talk about, here's an issue that's come up. And then it goes out from there, really based on, I think, individual licensure. There may be implications there depending on the level of what's occurred, but I think a lot of things can be resolved in the team. So there's a lot of ways to address that.
Yeah, I absolutely think that so there are two aspects, like you said, like you have to deal with the violation itself, and hopefully it's in your policies and procedures, or it's in those person's ethical rules. There's usually some sort of consequences, even if their only rules are as an employee, a staff person. But then you also have to deal with any harm and you have to heal from the harm. So I definitely some sort of restorative practice. I mean, we're just fortunate. My coordinator is trained in doing talking circles and restorative practices, and so she did that for us, and it worked really well.
I just put in the chat, as part of our strategic planning materials, we have a packet, like a sample intake packet, and that actually has waivers and a consent. And I think we address both HIPAA and 42 CFR in our sample template, so we can share that. And there is a note on there, don't just copy, don't just copy it and put your program's name at the top. Really review it and make sure it matches what you need there locally. So I just always want to make sure we provide the best guidance we can, but there may be rules or other things that are applicable there locally, and you need to make sure and address that in the forms that you're using. So we're happy to share what we do have, though.
I would love to see those as well, because we need to redo our consent form. So
Jacob did a good job. I asked him if he could update. He put together a really, really nice updated sample packet, so we'll send that out.
Awesome. Any other questions?
I just see questions on sample forms. So we'll have our participant registration. So we'll probably just send out a follow-up email, and we can send out a copy of that sample packet.
Nice.
I'm not seeing additional questions. I know Laura and Antonia, I think there might be an evaluation link. So if we want to share that, I think we're pretty much wrapped up. I don't think we've wrapped this topic up, though. I hope we get.
Thank you, everyone, for participating and doing it virtually through the chat. So even though I can't see your faces, thank you. So I don't know, maybe next year. Or maybe later this year. Looking to see something.
I think later this year. So for those of you that are still on, I will share, please check out wellnesscourts.org because the tribal healing to wellness enhancement training will be taking place in September. And that information is online at wellnesscourts.org. You can check that out, and would love to have possibly a follow-up on this session. Also, our Tribal Youth Resource Center tentatively planning our Tribal Youth National Conference, which will take place later this year. So we have more opportunities to talk about the scenarios that you might already be facing. So I know we came up with case examples, but if there's situations that you're facing individually in your community, let us know, because we'll be there. We can workshop some things and help you all individually, whatever is occurring there in the community. And Laura just dropped the evaluation link into the chat. So if you have time, please fill that out. And I think there's even space if there's topics that you're interested in for any of the upcoming conferences, let us know, because we're still finalizing workshop ideas. And then NIJA, when is the NIJA conference?
The NIJA conference is, is this a trick question? No, it's in October.
I could look up the date. I should have it on my calendar, but I don't.
I think it's the 25th and the 26th.
Thank you. I should know because I'm on the conference planning committee. But I'm like, October, that's months away, but it's not really. So thank you, Jacob. So yes.
Hopefully you get to tour Lambeau Field while you're here.
I know. We're going to Wisconsin this year. We've been planning to go to Wisconsin for several years now, but because of the pandemic, have been unable to. So this is the huge return to NIJA to Wisconsin. Maybe we'll get a flyover banner or something. I don't know.
Well, I just want to extend my gratitude, Judge Garrow. I know you have a lot on your plate, and taking this on was in addition to all the normal things that you do. So just our expression of our gratitude from TYRC and TLPI for your time and just your commitment to your own community. So thank you for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Here, and to our admin staff who help us get everything going and completed and actually happening. Thank you to Antonia and to Laura and Jacob. So appreciate everybody's presence today. And we can move to closing. I don't have a big closing plan today. I just want to say thank you to all of our new coordinators who are coming on board. We're here to support you. But we don't know what you need unless sometimes you reach out. So make sure if you are a new tribal grantee that we have your contact information. It helps us. You can actually email tribal youth at tlpi.org. That'll be on the materials that go out. So you should be connected to a TA coordinator, but we're all here. If you're not a tribal grantee, we serve any tribal community that's supporting youth. So feel free to outreach us and fill out a TA request if you're interested in wellness court, or if you want to just learn more about the work that TYRC does, you can always contact us. And I will just wish everybody well. Hope that you have a good rest of your week and an enjoyable weekend. So that's all I have to say. Jacob, I don't know if you have anything you want to add, but thank you for being here.
Thank you all. Appreciate it. Have a good day.